You're watching the Legal Breakdown, so we have a major piece of breaking news to cover here. On day 2 of Trump's trial, we have the prospect of Donald Trump being jailed for contempt, and this is of course, in response to the violation of his gag order. But first, I would remind folks that if you're watching, and you want to follow along with our coverage of the Trump trial, please subscribe. We'll be doing comprehensive coverage on a daily basis, so the link's right here on the screen, and also in the post description of this video. Yesterday we discussed Trump being fined, or jailed as a result of his upcoming contempt hearing next week for violating his gag order. We've now got news on that front, thanks to a motion that was filed by the Manhattan DA. What is he looking to do to Trump? Yeah, Brian, it is getting very bumpy for Donald Trump and his first criminal trial, because District Attorney Alvin Bragg's prosecutors made the formal ask. They filed a motion seeking to have Judge Merchan hold Donald Trump in cant 3 times, 3 counts, and what I really want to start with is just one short paragraph in the motion, asking Judge Merchan to hold Donald Trump in contempt, because I think it sort of beautifully sums things up. They say this court warned defendant that any violation of this gag order will result in sanctions under New York state law. This court should now hold defendant in criminal contempt for willfully disobeying a lawful command. Defendant is not above the law, and he cannot simply disregard judicial orders that upset him, and both the public and the participants in this criminal trial deserve reassurance that the judicial system stands ready to protect them and to preserve the rule of law in the face of defendants' extreme and deliberate provocations. It really doesn't get more direct, more forceful, more pointed than that, and they have now formally asked Judge Merchan to hold Donald Trump in contempt for willfully, flagrantly and repeatedly violating Judge Merchan's gag order. Now we had discussed the possibility of a hybrid approach, because there are 2 avenues that Judge Merchan can take, where he either imposes a fine, and that can be capped at provisions, or jail time, and that would be capped at 30 days for violation. And so what is the Manhattan DA seeking to do here, in terms of a punishment? So on the last page of this 13-page motion, they set out precisely what they want Judge Merchan to do. They say, first of all, hold him in contempt, 3 counts, and fine him the statutory max, which unfortunately is only $1,000 on each count, for a total of $3,000, and we are formally asking that you would advise defending Trump that the next violation, he will be subject to jail time. And I actually think this is becoming real, in a concrete way that it has not yet become for Donald Trump, and frankly, for all of us who frankly have been thirsty for justice and accountability, looking to have Donald Trump held accountable for just some of the crimes he's committed, and looking to have him held accountable for endangering, and this is not hyperbole, Brian, endangering the lives of everybody who's involved in the endeavor to hold Donald Trump accountable for his crimes: witnesses, jurors, district attorneys and their families, federal prosecutors and their families, judges, their families, their court staff. As of yet, we have sacrificed the safety of all of those people, all of those categories of people, in favor of striking the balance, in favor of Donald Trump, letting him to continue to engage in reckless and inflammatory and violence inciting rhetoric, which has mystified this old career prosecutor. But it looks like it's finally getting real for Donald Trump, and now the question is, what does Judge Merchan do? Not only with this first request for contempt, I think I have a pretty good idea what he's going to do, but what does he do when Donald Trump violates the gag order again, after he's been held in contempt? And so, to be clear, next week, when we find out whether he grants the Manhattan DA's request to impose jail time, if there's another violation, then that's it. The line in the sand will have been drawn, and if and when Donald Trump does violate the gag order again, he'll then be subject to imprisonment. Is that correct? It is, and let me tell you how this ordinarily plays out, because I had lots of defendants who violated all sorts of court orders, either while they were on pretrial release, they violated some condition of pretrial release set by the court, or even more, usually when people were on probation to a court, they would engage in all kinds of misconduct that would result in a judge sanctioning them for violating orders of their release on probation. So here's what judges typically do, Brian, and I can't predict 100% what Judge Merchan will do. Ordinarily, when the very first request for contempt comes in, because of defendant has violated a condition set by the court, the judge will give the defendant a stern talking to and say, next time, I'm going to up the ante. Then the next violation is, when the judge might punish them with a fine, and then usually they say, do it again, you're going to jail, and then it's almost a third bite of the apple, before judges are willing to put somebody in jail. For contempt, I think because Donald Trump has violated the gag order so many times in so many ways, and he's already been put on notice by Judge Marchand, who remember, had to up his own gag order over time, to make it more inclusive. I think judgment on when the hearing is conducted, on Thursday, the 23rd of April, we can talk in a minute about why it's, a week or more in the future, but I think, Judge Marchand will not do the stern warning thing. I think it'll go right to the $3,000 fine, and I think he will put Donald Trump on notice that do it again, you're going to go to jail, and then we can talk about whether Donald Trump is actually anxious to go to jail, for a day or a week or for the maximum permitted, under New York law, which is 30 days for each count of contempt. Right at this point, to your exact point, I think the political implications of this would be, look, if Donald Trump wants to make himself out to look like a victim in this case, which of course he does, he comes out every day, and he says, I can't be present for Barron's high school graduation, which I'm sure he was going to attend, and which, by the way, the judge hasn't even ruled on. He's whining that he can't go to Florida and Georgia and North Carolina to campaign. He's, anything he can do to present himself as the victim seems to be the avenue that Donald Trump wants to take. And so, judging by the fact that he wants to present himself as a victim, if he can land himself in detention, if he can land himself in a jail cell, nothing would be better for him to cry victim than to be able to, play this case out in the court of public opinion, and send his emails, and say that the evil radical, communist Marxist Democrats have jailed me illegally, because they want to do election interference. So I think that at the end of the day, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world, if he does come forward, and try to violate his gag order on purpose, to try and evoke this kind of a reaction from judgment. Sean Bryan, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that is precisely what Donald Trump is setting up, and the thing is, because there is a 30-day cap, that is the maximum, under New York state law, that somebody can be confined, for contempt of a court order. I think his calculation is going to be, how much can I fundraise off being put in jail for a day or a week, or even up to 30 days now. I also predict that when, probably not if, but when Judge Merchan has to cross that bridge, and has to impose some kind of a jail term, because of Donald Trump's chronic violation of the gag order, he'll probably start with 3 days or 5 days. And listen, 3 minutes is too much for anybody to have to sit in a jail cell. It's deadly serious business when we take away somebody's liberty interest. I was keenly aware of that when I was working as a prosecutor, but I do think Trump's calculation will be, man, I can sit in a jail cell for 3 days, and I will probably fundraise millions and millions of dollars off of that, and that will probably lead him to again violate the gag order after he's been held in contempt the first time and force Judge Merchan's hand. But here's the thing, whether it inspires people to actually send Donald Trump more of their hard-earned dollars or not, to me, and I think the Judge Marchand, is beside the point. You have to enforce the law, and you don't do prosecutorial or judicial business based on the collateral consequences, like Donald Trump's fundraising prospect. So I have a feeling we may see Donald Trump in a jail cell in the coming weeks, and it may actually be by design from Donald Trump himself. Also, he probably recognizes that this whole trial doesn't, to his benefit anyway, and so he may as well try to squeeze, some money out of his supporters, while he's doing it. And the way to do that is to say, okay, look, I'm in a trial. Anyway, I'm getting poor coverage, might as well just go all in and land myself in a jail cell, so that at least I can, perpetuate this victimhood narrative and get some money out of it. At the end of the day, yeah. And let me just answer the question that I fronted, in case any of the viewers are interested. Why do we have to wait another week and a couple of days for this to happen? Well, that's because the New York state law says there are 2 ways to find somebody guilty of contempt of court for violating a court order. 1. If the contempt happens in the presence of the judge, like in court, then the judge can literally bang his or her gavel and say, I find you in contempt, I'm finding you, and I order you detained for X number of days. However, if the contempt does not occur in the presence of the court, like it's in a social media post, Then the New York state law says, the defendant has to be given notice, and an opportunity to defend. That is what Alvin Bragg's prosecutors did today. They gave him notice. He will have an opportunity to defend himself. Come 9:30 a.m. on Thursday, the 23rd, and that is when I suspect we're going to see a former president of the United States being held in criminal contempt. Remember, he's already twice been held in civil contempt by Judge Engoron in his New York fraud trial when he violated Judge Engoron's gag order. So now we're moving forward. We're going to see a former president, I believe, held in criminal contempt for the first time. Alright, well, we'll leave it there. For those watching right now, of course, if you want to follow along, Glenn and I will be covering every facet of this trial, so please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Taylor Cohen. I'm Glenn Kirschner. You're watching The Legal Breakdown.